Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, SQL Querying 101, a beginner's guide presented by our expert technical instructor at New Horizons, Sandy Stevenson. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting and moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you in an email after the webinar. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I will now hand it over to you, Sandy.
Good morning and welcome everyone. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm very glad to be here with all of you today on this little bit of a journey through a little bit of a beginning area for SQL. So let's jump right on in here. So first of all, we use SQL, structured query language, to ask questions of our data, to gather data. And we use SQL statements to do that. And there's some basic parts of a SQL statement. So the required parts really are the select and the from. The select is what columns do I want returned to me? The from says, where am I going to get that data from? So it could be a table, it could be a view, it could be a derived table, it could be other areas as well, but we're mainly looking at tables here. So what do I want returned to me and where's it going to come from? So for example, if I'm selecting an order ID, quantity, unit price, I'm separating them with commas. These are the columns that are going to be returned to me. And I'm looking at the order details table, which is in the sales schema. And sales is the name of the schema, or which is like a namespace, if you will. We can also use it as an area for security. So my code would look kind of like this, where again in my select, I'm getting the order ID, the quantity, and the unit price from the order details table in the sales schema, and here I'm filtering this down. If I'm not using a where clause, I'm going to get every single row out of a table. Now imagine you might have a table with over 1,000,000 rows. You may not want all that data returned to you. So we're typically filtering down. So this is saying where quantity is less than 100. So I would get back the orders, the quantity, unit price from the order details table where the quantity is less than 100. Now we can also go further with this. Where we're grouping. Now, in this example, still getting the order ID, but I'm also adding up quantities and I'm also getting an average unit price. Still doing the where clause to where my quantity is less than 100, but now I'm grouping by order ID and I actually have to. I'm required to because I have aggregate functions up in the select. So this is going to give me grouped data. The where clause, that's my row by row by row filter. The group by says, take those rows and turn them into groups. And I can go a little bit further too. The having clause. The having clause is my filter on groups. So I'm still saying, okay, where the quantity is less than 100, so that filters other things out. I'm grouped by order ID, but then of that group, well, now those rows where the sum of quantity times unit price is greater than 10,000. That's what I want returned to me. So for example, maybe you have a small to medium paper products business and you have a lot of small to medium customers, which also have Walmart. And what you might be wanting to look at is where is the base of my business if I weed Walmart out of it? Maybe Walmart buys 1,000 pieces at a time or well over 100 pieces of any product at a time, but your other smaller customers don't. So here you're saying where the quantity is less than 100, that weeds out Walmart. So of that group collectively, who are my higher buyers? That's what that can tell you. So you can analyze your business a bit better there as well. And if we need something in a guaranteed sorted order, we need to use the order by clause. The order by clause is for sorting, and I can sort by more than one column as long as I separate it with commas. By default, it's in ascending order. If I want it in descending order, I just specify descending. So the way that this actually executes might surprise you. What's done first is actually the from clause, then the group by, then the having, then the select, which is why we can't use column aliases in a where clause, a group by, or having clause because SQL will not know about them. Well, I oftentimes need to get data from more than one table. And that's where I join tables based off of primary and foreign keys. Every table has to have a primary key. It must be unique and it must always have a value. It's never allowed to be null. And in other tables, we create foreign keys that join to that reference that primary key in other tables. So in this example, we're getting data from the orders table and the order details table. So let's say, for example, you go into the hardware store. You go into the hardware store on a Saturday and you buy a bunch of different things. Well, your order is going to have your order number on it, your name or the date. But your order details are going to be all those nuts and bolts and screws and plywood and paint that you bought. Those will be the order details. Okay. So can join those two tables together, two or more tables, which is very commonly done, to get, excuse me, the data that I need. So again, in using the select statement, the select is what columns do I want returned to me, separated by commas with the exception of the last column. The from clause is what tables have that data that I need to get the data from. The where clause is my row by row filter to filter out what I don't want, just keep what I do. The group by takes that row by row and turns it into groups. The having clause is our filter on groups. The order by is how do we want our output sorted if we need to have it in a guaranteed sorted order. Now, the from clause has extensions, of course, using joins, as does the order by. There's extensions to that clause by using offset fetch. Let's go have a look at some things now. So now I'm coming out and I am using a virtual environment, one of the virtual environment lab providers that we have used. I am using Microsoft's fictitious database AdventureWorks. And what I'm looking at here in AdventureWorks, there is a customer table that's in the sales schema. There's an order details table, and there's also an orders table. So what I'm first going to do, I'm just going to look at that order details table, and I'm going to go ahead and select it. And this database is non-case sensitive, so I don't have to specify things in uppercase, but I always do want to structure my code. So I'm going to select the order ID. I also want the quantity and I want the unit price from, in the sales schema, it's the order details table. Now, right now, I don't have a where clause. I'm not sorting this at all. So I'm going to get every single row out of that table. So I am getting 2,155 rows returned to me. And notice what I'm getting back. It's the headers and such coming from those columns. I'm getting the columns back that I've asked for. Well, what if I want to see that same data for where the quantity was less than 100? So once again, if I select the order ID, the quantity, unit price, from sales.order details, and this is what's called two-part naming, schema name.table name. This time, I'm going to say where quantity is less than 100. So now when I select this and run it, notice now I'm getting 2,132 rows returned. Okay? So again, I'm getting everywhere where the quantity is less than 100. Well, next, I may want to go ahead, let me pin this back here, gives a little more room. Now, I may want to group this data, but I also may want to do some aggregations. So if I go ahead again, select the order ID, and I want to go ahead and get the sum of quantities that were sold. I want to get the sum of quantities. I'm going to give that a column alias of, I'll call it total quantity. I also want the average unit price. So I'll do average on that. And I'll just give that a column alias. I'll call that average price. Okay, so that's the columns that's going to come back to me. I'm using column aliases to give a better column heading, much more understandable. I'm getting this from sales schema, order details table. And now I need to go ahead and group this. Now I can still say where quantity is less than 100, or I don't have to. It depends on what I'm looking for. but I have to do a group by. I have to group it. And the reason I have to group it is because I'm using aggregate functions in the select, and there is a non-aggregate here, the order ID. If there were no non-aggregates, well, I wouldn't need a group by, and I would only get one row returned. So I'm going to group by order ID. So now I am looking now at grouped data. I have 830 rows returned. If I throw in the where clause, so just building on this, where quantity is less than 100, and I run this, I'm getting 830 rows returned. Okay, I am grouped by order ID. So I'm getting back grouped data. Now, to add on to that, to really see this well, if I order by order ID, now I can see all those order IDs, the total quantities, the average price. I may want to know, how many actual orders were there. So I can do a count of all the rows that are being returned, and I'll call that, let's call that number of line items. I'll call that number of line items. And there we go. So I can see each one of these orders, how many line items were actually purchased. Because again, I'm dealing with grouped data now. Now, if I come a little bit further, here I want to do the having clause. So now I'm going to go ahead and select, same as I did before. Okay, same as in fact, I'm just going to copy this and paste it and save a little bit of typing here. Because I'm keeping this the same. So again, now, again, my where clause, I'm filtering out. I only want to see where those individual quantities are less than 100. I'm still going to sort it by order ID. In fact, I may change that, but now I'm going to use the having clause. And I want to say having the sum of quantity times, in fact, unit price greater than 10,000. Okay. So the having clause is my filter on groups. That's my filter on groups. And right now I'm sorting it by order ID. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. So now I'm down to 12 rows. Now I'm down to 12 rows. Now, I do have my total quantities, the average price, and number of line items. But I might want to see the total price on those sales as well. So I'm just going to come right up to my select, and I'm going to say sum of quantity times price. I'll call that total. And I'll run this again. Okay. Now I can see how those added up. I can see they're all over 10,000. I can see they're all over 10,000 here. So I'm going to copy this code one more time. And here, this time, I'm going to sort this a little differently. Instead of sorting by order ID, I'm going to sort by that total column. Now, since the select clause is being done prior to the order by, I can use a column alias here. So I can say order by total in descending order, so I see my highest items first. And there we go. I can see that order 10865 has my highest totals. I only bought two things, but it's my highest totals. And if I had time, if there was a tie in here, I could also sort by an additional column as well. But many times we need to look at more than one table. So if I come back over and I look at the data again, right here's the customer table. Notice we have a company name, a contact name, and so forth here. I want to see what customers have placed an order and what the line items were. Just like I would maybe for billing purposes or statements, something like that. Now, I'm going to do what's called aliasing on the table, so I don't have to type the full table name out all the time as well. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to select the company name. And I'm going to alias the customer table as C. So I'm going to say company name. Just call that customer. I'm also going to get the contact name. I'll call that contact. Okay. I want to verify that my columns are correct here. Yep. And that's correct. So that's all I want out of the customer table. And I'm going to come down the next line, and I often do this just to have data coming from my different tables on a different line. I want to get data out of my orders table. So I want the order ID. I'm going to alias the orders table as O. I'm going to make sure that I'm using the correct columns. So when I look, order ID is the name of the column. I also want, you'll notice in the orders table, we also have an order date, but that's a date time. But there's no time with it. So I'm going to change it to a date data type, because if it's date and time, there's no time, it's going to come back as all midnight. It's not helpful. So I'm going to do a cast on the date time, on the, excuse me, the order date. I'm going to make that a date data type for the purpose of the query. I'll call that order date. So again, you can see my columns are making sense by the column names that I'm using here. That's all I want, excuse me, out of the orders table. Out of the order details table, which I'll alias is OD, out of that, I would like to have out of this, I would want the quantity. So I want the quantity, and I'm just going to change that text. That's the way that will come in my order on my header. I also want the unit price. I'll call that price. I'm also going to multiply those. So I'll take the quantity times unit price. That's how you know it's live. Times unit price. I'll call that total sale. Call that total sales. Let me see if there's anything else I want out of that order details table. And nope, that's pretty good. That's good there. Now, I also may want to see the product name. So I'm going to put a comma in here. The product table, I'll alias with a P. And in the product table, when I look at the product table, that is in the production schema. So in my product table, I want the product name. I'll call that product. So that's the information I want for right now. So now if I come over in my from clause, I'm going to say from sales dot. I want to see if the table names are plural or singular, and they are plural. Some databases, they are singular. So again, I'm showing my table alias right here. So I'm taking the customers table as C. I'm going to join with the orders table. I'll call that O. Again, I gave that the alias of O. I need to specify what I'm joining on. So the primary key to the customers table is the customer ID. And again, when I look at the column names, it'll be cust ID. Okay. So be cust ID. Where it equals coming out of the orders table, the cust ID. That is the foreign key. I also need to join in my order details table. I alias that as OD, and I'm joining on O dot order ID, where it equals OD dot order ID. And I need to bring in that product table. That's in the production schema. I alias that as P, and I'm joining that on the product ID in the order details table, where it equals the product ID in the product table. I'm going to go ahead and sort this by total sales in descending order. So now, hopefully I have no typos in here. I'm going to go ahead and run this. And it should be products, not products. Where am I at? Products. Yeah, make sure it's unit price. And it is. And did I spell something wrong? TPRICE. That would be OD. I had the wrong column alias in there. And there we go. So now I am seeing my customers that have placed an order and what all the items are that they purchased. Now I'm seeing all the items that they purchased. Now, what if I want to see my customers that have not placed an order at all? So for that, I can simply select, for example, C.company name. Okay, I'll call that customer. Okay, want the customer. And I'm also going to get the order date. Actually, I'll get the order ID from the customers table, aliasing it as C. Here I'm doing a left outer join. And what that says is give me every single customer, even if they haven't placed an order, but give me the orders that they did. Give me the orders that they did. And there will be nulls as placeholders for any customers that did not place an order. But I said I only want to see customers that have not placed an order. So here I'm going to say where, for example, O.order ID is null. So that should bring me back only customers that have not placed an order, if any have not placed an order. And there are two that have never placed an order. Notice order ID is null. That's telling me there is no record in the orders table for those two customers. This is all pieces of code that we use in SQL all the time. And we can go way, way further. But these are some of the basics, excuse me, some of the basics that we use in SQL to extract our data, to begin to analyze our data, to see what's going on in our business, to create maybe views for different reports and such. These are some of the base pieces of code that we use all the time. Thank you very much for allowing me here to be with you. And I've got one more thing here for you as well. These are additional classes coming up. We do have SQL Querying Fundamentals, Part 1, which is a one-day course. You'll see the dates there with it. SQL Querying Fundamentals Part 2 and 55366, which is a 5-day class on querying Microsoft SQL Server with Transact SQL. Thank you for letting me be here with you today. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandy. We actually had one quick question. Um, do we not need to write O dot order date when we cast it?
Okay, when I did the order date, come down to where that was. When I did that, I'm trying to see which one I did it in. There we go. When I did this with this, the reason I didn't need to really use that alias is because I'm using that function. So it's looking inside of that function to be able to do that. So I could get away with not having to do that. Best practice is to have that over there. That is best practice to do that since I did alias that table in that fashion.
Fantastic insight. Thank you so much, Sandy. We had one more quick question, and if anyone has any more last-minute questions, please do not be afraid to throw them in the chat.
Emily, do SQL
Yeah.
statements need to end with a semicolon? That's best practice. However, You don't have to, with the exception of just a couple areas. Merge statement must end with a semicolon. There's only a handful of areas where they're required to. There was discussion several years ago of making it required. That hasn't happened yet. In Oracle, they have to, because that is actually separating everything and that's how you execute. But in Microsoft, no, only for a couple statements. Join by default is left. So when I say join right here, and pardon me, it's not left. Join by default, when I say here, that is an inner join. If I'm going to do a left join, I must specify left. I don't have to say outer, but I have to specify left for a left join. But the default join is an inner join. So everything I did up here, all these joins, these were all inner joins. We only have a couple minutes left yet here, Emily. I really strongly suggest you take the course. But I will tell you, a left outer join, you get every single column out of the table, every row out of the table on the left, and only those that match out of the table on the right. The table on the left is that first table following the from. A right outer join does the opposite. It'll get every single table, every single column out of the table on the right, and only those that match out of the table on the left. Okay. Inner joins, you get everything from table A and everything from table B where that join factor matches. So I would get all customers who have placed an order with a normal inner join. Okay. If a customer didn't place an order, I don't get it back. If there's an order in there not attached to a customer, I don't get that back. That's a default inner join. Yep. And Jessica, it is. This is just a quick webinar. Yeah, quick webinar. Yep.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sandy. And I just wanted to let our audience know if they missed out on any part of the session, we will absolutely be sharing this recording with all of you in an email after the webinar. So be on the lookout for that. Alrighty. Thanks everyone so much for attending today. And thank you so much, Sandy, for your fantastic insight.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. And we will hopefully see you all very soon in the classroom. Bye for now. All right.